The Danish Deception, Part 1. Okay, so it all started in June of 2022. I was in a place in my life where I was working 2 jobs. I was working like a dog, and I knew I needed a break. So I reached out to my friend, Sarah, who was living in Germany at the time with her husband, and I said, let's take a trip. Let's go somewhere in Europe. And she was so down, and we were trying to decide where we wanted to go, and we decided to go to Hvar, Croatia, because we wanted somewhere that was like a cute local town that was by the water, but it wouldn't be as crazy busy as other places in Europe. And so we decided to go to Hvar. We flew to Split first, met there, took a ferry over. And at first I was just so amazed at how beautiful this place was. And so the first night I was a little bit jet lagged. So we kept it very chill, grabbed dinner, then went back to our Airbnb. And the next morning when we woke up, we had literally 2 things on our agenda, and that was to eat and drink and be by the water. And well, I guess that's 3 things, but yeah, eat, drink, and be by the water. So we went to Hula Hula, which if you've been to Hvar, you've been to Hula Hula. It's this beach club that's very well known there, and it's right on the water. And we're laying in day beds kind of off to the side, minding our own business, sipping mojitos. And I look up and I see this very attractive man. And the first thing that came to my mind was, this man looks like he is walking straight out of a Calvin Klein ad. And I'm telling you guys, 6'3", blonde hair, blue eyes, chiseled skin, so tan, muscles everywhere. I was definitely taken aback. And I feel like it takes a lot for me to really double take a man just based on his looks like that. And 100%, I was a little bit just in awe. I didn't even realize that he was like with a friend at first. And so I'm still minding my own business, keeping it chill. And he looks over at me and he says, how are the drinks? And I said, the drinks are wonderful. We're just sipping mojitos. He said, should I get us all around? And I said, absolutely. Number 1, he's cute. Number 2, who wouldn't want a free mojito? So I said yes. We got a round of drinks and we're sipping our drinks, and we just start small talking. And I asked them where they're from, and they say that they're both from Denmark. My ex was living in Copenhagen, and then his friend was living in a smaller town called Aalborg, which is north of Copenhagen, and that was actually my ex's hometown, that his friend was still living there. And so we were just small talking the whole time. We didn't really talk about a whole lot of things. It was just like, where are you from? And just basic things. But they were asking us, what's your plan for the rest of the trip? And we told them, we're doing a full day boat excursion tomorrow, and then we're going to dinner tonight at this place called Dalmatino. And he said, oh, how's the dinner spot? And I was like, I don't know, but I got recommended by a friend to go there. And he was like, okay, well, maybe we'll meet up with you guys again later. And I said, sure. So we're getting a little bit tired, so we decided that it's time for us to leave. And so as we're leaving, I decide to make a bold move and just ask him for his Instagram. And obviously I'm trying to be a little sly, so I asked him and his friend for their Instagrams. And we exchange Instagrams. We get into our taxi to go back to our Airbnb, and we're literally en route to our Airbnb, and I get a DM from him, and he basically said, it was so nice meeting you. Have fun at Dalmatino. Maybe we'll see you guys later. Didn't read anything into it. I just was like, it was fun to just have a conversation with a cute guy. And so we go back to our Airbnb, we get dressed, we get ready for dinner, and we're like on our way to dinner, and he is like messaging me about the restaurant and asking us details about it. I didn't think anything of it. But we sit down, we're having dinner, we have a spectacular dinner, and we're finishing off the evening with our desserts, AKA espresso martinis. And I'm sipping my drink, and I look up and I see him and his friend at the restaurant. And they walk up over to us, and I'm like, oh, hey. He's like, yeah, they're a little booked up, but they said they can seat us in 20 minutes. I was like, oh, cool. Well, we're about to be done, but we'll go grab a drink. Maybe we can meet up later. And he said, okay, sounds good. So it's kind of awkward timing because we were finishing up dinner while they hadn't even been sat yet. And so we went to a bar across the street, and we were grabbing drinks, and I just I hit a wall, and I was like, okay, now I need to go to sleep. And I was super jet lagged. And so I sent him a DM just basically saying, hey, we are so tired. We have a full boat excursion tomorrow. I don't think we're gonna stay out much later. And he was like, that's totally fine. And so the next day we wake up, we get on the boat, and I start obviously posting all my cute photos. Remember I took a photo driving the boat, and we were just, having fun. And I was like looking at my Instagram story and I see he's like hearting every single story and like he's responded to a couple of them. I am not the type of person that reads very much into activity on social media like that, but it was something that I noticed. And so, we continued on with that for like a day and a half. And then he reaches out to me and he says, hey, like, what are you guys doing? And at this time, it is our last night in Havar. And he said, what are you guys doing tonight? And I said, we don't really have plans because we didn't. And he said, well, do you guys want to come to dinner with us? And me and my friend were like, absolutely, sure. And she wasn't really down to go. I kind of forced her because I was like, this guy's hot and it's a free dinner. Like, let's just go. It'll be fun. And so she's a good friend. So she came with me and we get to the restaurant and him and his friend are sitting across from each other. So obviously I took the seat next to him. I was sitting across from my friend and we're sitting there, we're having a wonderful dinner and drinking tons of wine. And I come up with this idea to play this game where I'm asking his best friend to describe what my ex's type was. And because we were obviously like vibing with each other and I was just curious. And so his best friend starts listing off everything like good morals, hard worker, all these things. And like, I felt like he was describing me. And after his friend was done talking, my best friend basically said, aside from being a good cook, she checks off every single box. And I remember I looked at him, my ex, and I said, but I will become a great cook for a good man. And he starts laughing. I remember I put my hand on his leg. And that was the first time in my life that I felt that instant electricity from someone's touch. Like it literally felt like I was getting shocked. And we instantly like had this physical attraction towards each other. And we started talking about what we did for work. And I told him that I was working as a real estate agent and in tech. And then he told me, I'm actually chief commercial officer for a ad tech company that does marketing for real estate companies. So I was working in real estate and tech and he was working in real estate and tech and everything just like felt like it was aligning. But again, I'm like, this guy lives in Copenhagen. There's nothing that's gonna come from this. So after dinner, we go and grab some drinks at a bar nearby and we grabbed one drink and they're definitely gearing up to go back out. And it was our last night and my friend really did not want to go out. And I am not the type of a girl to ever leave my friend for a man, never in a million years. So I ended up just saying, hey, I think we're gonna call it a night and we're gonna head out. And he was respectful of that 100%. And I remember we just hugged goodbye and we left and that was it. And so we're going back to our Airbnb, we're walking home and I get a DM from him and he said, it was so nice meeting you. I hope it's not the last time. Also, South Africa is happening. I can see it. And the reason why he said that was because I was telling him that I had wanted to go to South Africa for that following Christmas and because my family was going to be traveling. And he said, I've always dreamt of going to South Africa. And I jokingly was like, well, you're invited if you want to come. And so whenever he made that comment to me in the DM, I was like, okay, sure. I am not thinking anything of it, right? At this point, whatever, like this guy lives 5,000 miles away from me. I'm not thinking anything of it. So the next day, my friend goes back to Germany and I go to Barcelona to meet up with some friends. And again, I'm like posting throughout my trip. And every time I look at my phone, it's like he's DMing me, messaging me, and he's continuing all of this. And I'm just a little bit shocked, but also like very interested still at the same time. And he was remembering things that I told him at dinner. Like I had told him that I was gonna buy a Chanel bag because I wanted to reward myself for working hard. And he had messaged me and been like, hey, did you get your Chanel bag? And I was literally like drunk off sangrias in my bikini and cover up in the Chanel store when I got that DM. And I sent him a selfie and he said, this is the best photo I've ever seen. And I just like felt like I could just be myself with him already. And we were just getting along and having good conversation. So again, he doesn't even have my phone number at this point. We were literally just flirting through DMs. So I end up leaving Barcelona the next day and I land and he sends me a message and he said, what are you doing this weekend? Do you want to go to Ibiza? And I saw the message and I was like, what? And we will continue in part 2. The Danish Deception Part 2. Okay, so he sent me this message saying, you should come to Ibiza this weekend. I'm going with a bunch of friends. And he's like, I'll send you the flight. Everything will be paid for. And I thought about it for a second because, come on, who wouldn't want to go to Ibiza? And then I thought a couple of reasons why I didn't want to go was mainly because I just bought a Chanel bag. So I was like, I want to work and make more money. And also I felt like this is the type of guy that things come easy for him. And this is not something that's going to be easy for you to obtain. And I didn't want our first weekend to be like just partying together with all of his friends. Like that's not what I wanted. So I ended up telling him no, but I just ended up saying that I needed to work. And I thought he was never going to talk to me again. But somehow this like lit a fire under him and he became even more persistent and he started pursuing me even more. And he was sending me messages like, when are you gonna come visit me in Copenhagen? Or I would love to come to Dallas to come see you. And I was just like, who is this man and what's happening? Still not really taking him serious. And then maybe like a couple weeks later, he sends me another message. And at this point, we're still talking pretty consistently on Instagram. We still do not have each other's numbers. And he sends me a message. He says, hey, I have a work conference coming up in Monaco and I would love for you to come. And I read that message and I was like near the south of France, like that Monaco? And he was like, yeah, like I can get you your flight and everything will be taken care of. And I was like, okay, well, give me some time to think about it because I didn't want to say yes on the spot, but I was like, okay, this is something I definitely want to consider. So I thought about it for a while. I talked to my friends about it. I talked to my sisters about it. At first I was like, I don't think I'm going to do it. Like, this is crazy. And then over time I started like talking myself into it. And then one morning I woke up and I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go to Monaco. So I sent him a message and I said, hey, I've decided I'm going to come to Monaco. And he sends me a message. He said, this is the best day ever. I'm so happy. Send me your passport and everything. I'll book the flight. So I sent him a picture of my passport. And I also was like, oh, and by the way, here's my phone number. He was like, I've been waiting for you to give this to me for now like weeks. And I said, okay, here you go. Thank you for like inviting me on this trip. So I give him my phone number and he sends me a message and he said, it took you long enough. And I said, oh yeah, well, sorry. I'm just a little bit more reserved when it comes to like dating and men. Like I just like to make sure like I'm a very intentional person. And he was just so respectful to me. I remember when he was booking the flights and everything, he was like, don't worry, like I'll get you your own hotel room. Like he was just being so respectful. And so I remember our very first phone call so perfectly because it came completely out of the blue. It was like on like a Tuesday and I'm sitting at my work desk and he sends me a message. He's like, can I call you? And I was like, oh, he wants to call me. And I'm literally discombobulated, freaking out. Like, what am I going to do when this man actually calls me? But I was like, you need to get together. So he calls me, I answer the phone, and he's actually in a cab to the airport. He's about to go on a work trip. And we were just small talking about our day. And I felt like those like butterflies that I felt whenever we had been together at dinner in Croatia. And I remember getting off the phone with him and I was just sitting there like cheesing, like, which I don't ever do. And I was just, this guy is special. And he sent me a message and he was like, you are so cute. Like, I love talking to you. And I said, I love talking to you too. And so basically from that moment on, we just started talking on the phone all the time, like for 1 hour, 2 hours a day. We started talking about a lot of things, about a lot of different aspects of our lives. He was telling me that, he was living in Copenhagen. He was living in this condo. Obviously, he knew that I lived in Dallas. And then we started talking about past relationships. And I told him, I was very honest. I said, I actually haven't had like a truly serious relationship before. I have always been a very independent person, but I do want to meet someone. I do want to like get married and have kids, but I don't feel like that pressure to like force it. Like I have such a great example with my parents and I really want to have like an amazing love in this lifetime. And so I'm going to take my time to find that. And I asked him like, what's your history with your dating? And he was like, yeah, well, I actually was in a relationship with a girl and we were together for about 4 years. And I actually broke up with her about 4 months before I met you. And I said, oh my gosh, like the 4 years is a long time. He said, yeah, like it needed to happen for a while. And really what happened was that she told him that she was ready to have kids and he wasn't ready to have kids. And I guess that forced him to realize that she wasn't the one, and they were living together. So it was like a really hard situation to get out of, but he finally was able to do so. And so I was happy to hear that had been about 4 months since they broke up, because if he had said like they had just broken up, I would have been a little bit more hesitant to pursue things, because I know like you go through a breakup, you need time to heal. But I felt like, okay, 4 months should be enough time. And then we started talking about like our families a little bit too. I told him I'm super close with my family. He said I'm really close with my mom and my little sister. I do have an older sister that I don't talk to, and basically something happened and she was like being like physically abusive, verbally, physically abusive towards his mom, and he decided to cut her out of his life because she's crazy. And I said, listen, I get that. That makes sense. Like, you should not have her in your life. And I think just like over the course of a month, we're talking on the phone for just hours. And I tell people all the time that it felt like we fell in love over the phone, because from the time that I had decided to go to Monaco to the time that I actually left for Monaco, it was a month. And we had this plan that we weren't going to FaceTime at all, because we wanted the next time we saw each other to be in person, which I thought at the time was super romantic. And so, you know, we started talking about like hypotheticals. I remember he told me one day, he said, you know, if we ever end up getting married, you're going to meet the queen. And I remember just like laughing at that comment. And he said, no, I'm being serious. And I said, what do you mean I'll meet the queen? And he said, well, you know, my family has a royal title. And I was like, wait, what? And he sent me this link to this site. It's called the Order of the Elephants. And he said, you can do some research and then we can talk about it. And I said, okay. So I start going through the page that he sent me, and I see someone that had the same last name as him, like some old guy from like the 1700s. And I remember taking a screenshot and I said, is this your great great grandpa? And he goes, now you're getting on track. My next question to you is, how's your etiquette? And I was like, I mean, I think it's okay. And so I'm sitting here like, who is this man? He's attractive. He has a great job. He has a royal title. Like, is there anything wrong with him at this point? And I have always believed in the term, it's too good to be true. But I mean, and I was feeling that 100%. Like, I felt like, when's the other shoe gonna drop? But it didn't drop that first month. It was just like, we truly fell in love over the phone. And so we are getting closer and closer to the trip to Monaco, and I start packing, and I feel like that's like when the nerves start hitting me, was when I'm packing, like, oh my goodness, this is actually happening. And I remember my sister was like, you need to put air tags in like all your bags. And I'm like, I don't need to put air tags in anything. Like, I trust this man. Like, I know like it's gonna be okay. Like, every part of me felt like so safe with him already, which was crazy because I hadn't really spent much time with him. Maybe this is trauma from being on The Bachelor, I'm not sure. But I felt very safe with him. And so the day comes where I'm supposed to go on the trip. And so I order my Uber, get to the airport, and I felt like it was kind of like a good sign, because I posted that I was at DFW, and one of my really good girlfriends texted me that lives in a different state. She was like, hey, I'm actually in DFW too. And I was like, oh my gosh. So she comes, meets me at my terminal. She's like, where are you going? I go, I'm actually going to Monaco to meet this guy that I met in Croatia. And she was like, this is insane. And so I just felt like seeing that friend was like a good sign. I don't know why. And I ended up just boarding the flight. I remember boarding that first flight. I had a layover in Madrid, but boarding that first flight, I was sitting there and I was like, this shit is really happening. And all the nerves are just taking over, but I'm like, take a chill pill. It's gonna be okay. You're gonna get there. It's gonna be fine. And at that point, I was like, okay, the worst thing that happens is like, he's a crazy person and I have enough money where I can like just book my own hotel and I'll just have a good time by myself. Like, it'll be fine. So I like had that backup plan. But yeah, I had my layover in Madrid, and then my next flight was to Nice. And so I board my flight to Nice. It was like a really quick flight, and I get to Nice, I land, I get my bags and baggage claim. I sent him a text. I said, I'm here. And I'm rolling both of my bags, about to walk out, freaking out, and let's continue on in part 3. The Danish deception, part 3. Okay, so I'm walking out of baggage claim. I have my bags. And at this point, worst case scenarios are playing in my head. I'm like, what if this whole thing is just gonna be so awkward and we're not gonna have that connection like I think we have? But I also told myself, you're gonna have to figure it out and let's just do this. So I walk out of baggage claim and I'm scanning the scene and I see him. And everything in me feels peace and joy. And I just make a beeline to him. Like, it's one of those, like, I'm walking, but like low-key I'm running. And I finally get to him. He hugs me, but like he picks me off the ground and he's hugging me and I'm hugging him back. And then he puts me down. He looks at me, he goes, "Hi, Bambi." And that was a nickname he used to call me. And I was like, "Hi." And we just proceed to make out in the Nice airport for 2 straight minutes. And I am not the type of person to ever do that, but I just felt so much attraction towards him and I just did not care. And I remember that we were in the taxi going to the hotel and we had to put ourselves at like an arm's length because we were just like going at it, like kissing. And I was like, this taxi driver is gonna start feeling super uncomfortable. So we're like, we need to stop. And so we get to the hotel, we check in, we get to the hotel room, and let's just say we had a wonderful time, multiple times. Mom and Dad, I am so sorry for that part. We ended up going to dinner afterwards, and I just remember sitting here and I was like, I feel like this is my dream come true being here with you. And he said, I feel like this is my dream come true. Like, I'm so grateful to be here. Like, you're like my dream girl, and you were even better than I remembered if that was even possible. And it just felt like everything was aligning perfectly. And so the next day we had a car rental. So we went to Monaco, and that's where his work event was. And I remember he told me, he's like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to bring you to all of the events. And I told him, you know what? I'm gonna be in Monaco. So if you can't take me to things, that's fine. I'll just go explore the city. And I remember we get there and he had like a kickoff event, like first things first when we arrived. And so I wasn't invited. I also didn't really want to go. So he went to that and I was just like exploring Monaco. And he sends me a message. He said, "Hey, you're gonna be able to come to the event tonight. Do you have something to wear?" And I remember being like, I didn't bring anything like for like a professional cocktail party. And he was like, "Oh, well, we're in Monaco, so you wear whatever." And I said, okay. So I remember I put on this green romper and we went to this hotel, and I remember being super nervous because I'm used to like networking, but not with like Norwegians and like a bunch of people that aren't like fluent in English, which actually people in Norway, they all are fluent in English. I was very impressed. But I just started talking to different agents because these were all real estate agents, and I'm a realtor. So I felt like I could connect with them so well. And I remember I was talking to this man, me and my ex were talking to this man, and he was like so interested by me. And he said, "Are you coming to the boat party tomorrow?" And I knew there was a boat party coming up the next day, but I also just like assumed I wouldn't be able to go. And I said, well, I looked at my ex, I go, I don't know, like, am I? And my ex looks at me, he goes, "Well, you're talking to the CEO, so I think that's fine." I said, "Oh." The CEO was like, "Yeah, I'd love for you to come." And he was just so nice. And I met so many great people, and also just watching him in his element working, and he's just so charming and charismatic, and everyone, when people talk to him, they're just so fascinated by him, like I was. And so we had a great night, and then the next day was a boat party, and I remember I was just hanging out on the boat, again, just watching him go talk to all these big customers, and I didn't understand a word he was saying, but I just felt like he just looked like he was super smart. And later on that night, I remember they had another event, and I wasn't invited to that event, which is fine, but I came and met up with him afterwards, and we got drinks. And the next day, we decided to head to Saint-Tropez. And I remember we get to the hotel in Saint-Tropez. This hotel is so nice. I've stayed in 5-star hotels before, but like I've never stayed in like 5-star hotels that are like a full suite with like private pool. And I like looked up the room, and it was like 1,500 to like 2,000 euros a night. And I'm like absolutely not used to this. And I remember telling him that because I'm not the type of person to like walk into something like this and be like, oh yeah, like I'm used to this stuff. I'm not gonna be fake. So I told him like, I am not used to staying in hotels like this, or like especially specifically suites like this. And he was like, well, you know, while we're together, I want you to know, like, I want to give you the world. And I was like, thank you so much. Like, I feel so grateful. And I remember telling him that in that moment. And later on that night, we go to L'Opera and we're having a wonderful time, drinking great wine, having good food. And if you've been to L'Opera in Saint-Tropez, it's very much a party restaurant. Like, you have dancers on the tables. It's like, it's a party scene, but like, you know, that's also like kind of like my vibe when I'm like, you know, have a couple of drinks in me. And we're sitting at dinner and he's talking to me about his mom and talking about how he's so protective over her and how much he loves her and how he like would do anything for her. And I remember just like looking at him and just being like, this is like everything I want in a man. If a man is going to treat his family with respect, the chances of him treating your family with respect are so much higher. And I just felt like I saw his heart, and it just made me just fall for him even more than I had already. And I guess my thoughts had translated to my face because he picked up on some expression and he was like, what is it? And I was like, nothing. He said, tell me. I go, nothing. And then he grabs my face and he pulls it close to him. He goes, tell me. And I say, I'm in love with you. And then I started bawling my eyes out at L'Opera in Saint-Tropez. And this was a sweet moment, but it was also very uncomfortable and embarrassing because all the workers are all thinking that I'm getting dumped right now when I'm really just falling in love for the first time and like don't know how to control my emotions. And I remember just like bawling my eyes out and being like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what this feeling is. Like, I don't know what's happening. Like, and he's just sitting there smiling and he's like, this is like one of the best nights of my life. And he looked at me, he goes, I want to say it back to you, but I also want to have my own special moment, so I'm not going to do it right now. And I said, thank you, God, because I would not want you to tell me right now. And honestly, never in a million years did I think that I would say I love you first to him, but he pulled it out of me and I felt it. So I said, you know what? I'm going to say it. And I did. And it felt so good. And I remember we went back to the hotel that night, got some sleep, and the next morning we went to Bagatelle and we had just like a beach day. And I used to tell everyone that this was the best day of my life because we spent the whole day just swimming and laughing and eating and having such a great time. And I just thought to myself, like, I could do this forever. And like, I also thought to myself, like, I don't care if we're on a couch in Dallas, Texas. Like, I just want to be around him all the time. And so that night we go to dinner and I remember just asking him, what are the things that you think are important as we like enter into this relationship? And he told me, if you give me respect and loyalty, I will give you the world. And I told him I can do that. And then I told him, there's a few things you should know. Number one, your money is great, but it's the cherry on top of a great sundae. You could lose it all tomorrow and I would not go anywhere. Like, the money is just like this little added benefit, but I love you for you. I'm here for who you are as a person, not the money. Also, cheating is 100% a deal breaker for me. I just feel like I always need to like put that out there. I don't care if we've been married for 15 years with 4 kids, I will leave. I will not put up with cheating. And also, my family is my world. I'm a warrior for my family and friends. And please don't ever put me in a position where I have to choose, because like I love my family so much, and that would be a situation that would cause me so much pain, and I just would never want to be in that position. He said, I understand completely, and I love that about you. So we set those ground rules, and the next day we go to Cannes. And I remember that first day in Cannes, we're having a great time. We went to the beach for a little bit, and then we decided we're gonna go shopping. And he tells me, you can pick out whatever you want to buy, you can get it. So we're going to like Cartier, we're going to Chanel, we go to Dior. I see this yellow bag I fall in love with, but I felt so uncomfortable because I don't want this man to think that I'm with him for his money. And I didn't want him to feel like I was using him. So I remember just being like, oh, it's okay. Like, I love this purse, but I was like, it's just okay. And we end up going to Dolce & Gabbana, and I pick out this nice pair of $200 sunglasses. And he looks at me, he goes, dang, you're cheap. And I said, I'm a simple girl, even though I wanted the Dior bag. But I wanted him to know that I was there for the right reasons. Oh my gosh, bachelor trauma is still kicking in. And so later that night, we decided to go to dinner, and we're eating dinner, and I go to the bathroom, and I had myself a fall going to the bathroom, going up the stairs, and everything went black. and I will continue on the series. The Danish Deception Part 4. Okay, just to recap, we went to Monaco, then we went to Saint-Tropez, and we ended the trip in Cannes. And the very last night we had together, we were at dinner, and I'm walking to go to the bathroom, and I fall, and everything goes black. And let me tell you, I am a clumsy person. I know I'm a clumsy person. I'm always tripping over myself. And that day specifically, I had been tripping over my dress pretty frequently throughout the day. But I've never had like a serious accident before like this. And it was completely out of the blue. I was walking up the stairs, and I remember walking up the stairs, and the stairs in France are extremely narrow. If you've been, then you definitely would probably agree with me. And so I basically came to after falling, hitting my head, and I see these 3 men above me, and they're wearing like these bright turquoise polos. And I remember that they were the waiters. That was what they were wearing. And I remember just like coming awake and being like, what the fuck is happening? But no one was speaking any English. They're all like screaming in French, freaking out. And so I pass out again, then I come to again, and finally I'm able to say, someone go get my boyfriend. And then I pass out again, then I come to again, and then my ex is sitting next to me. And I see him, and I'm like, what is going on? He's like, I don't know what happened. I think you fell. And I'm like, I don't remember anything. I don't know what happened. And he looked at me, he goes, do you have a history with epilepsy? I'm like, epilepsy? No, I don't have any history with that. I was like, why? He said, because you've been having seizures for the past 10 minutes. And I was like, seizures? I have never, ever had a seizure in my life. So this was shocking news, but I also wasn't like all the way there. So I was just so confused at what was happening. And I remember touching my head, and then I looked at my hand, and there was so much blood. And then I like started looking around, and everything felt wet. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was going to the bathroom. So I look at him and I ask him, I'm like, is this pee? He was like, no, they just like dumped water on you. And I was like, okay. And so they basically told us that because the streets in Cannes are so narrow, they couldn't bring an ambulance. It had to be a fire truck, which I didn't care. I just wanted to get to the hospital. So these firemen come and they get me up, and I stand up, I look down, look at the puddle of water, then I smell my dress. I go, oh my gosh, this is urine. So you're telling me that I've been dating this man for 3 days, and he is now sitting in a pool of my urine and my blood, watching me have seizures. I was just I couldn't believe that this was the reality of what was happening. I get into the truck, and they take us to the hospital, and I'm still freaking out at this point because I literally don't know if I have like a severe brain bleed or what's going on. And they take us into the waiting room, and they're about to take us back. And I remember the nurse said that my ex couldn't go back with me because they still had super strict restrictions from COVID. So he had to wait in the waiting room. And I remember just freaking out because no one is speaking English at this point. And I don't know what to do. I'm so terrified. I feel so alone. And I remember just looking at him, and he could just see the fear in my eyes. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. He's like, just stay calm. I was like, okay. And he ends up leaning into me before they tell him that it's time to go. And he tells me, before you go, I just wanted to tell you that I love you. And I just remember being like, really? Here of all places? He was like, yeah, I wanted to tell you. And I said, I was so grateful to hear it from him, but also I was like, are you only telling me this because you think I'm about to die? And so a lot of things were going through my head, and I ended up going back, getting a CT scan. They ended up saying, hey, everything's good. You just have a severe concussion, hence why I had seizures. And they're like, you're gonna have to get 4 stitches in your eyebrow. You guys can kind of see the scar. I'm wearing makeup, so you can't really tell. So after I get my stitches, I go back out to the waiting room, and I see my ex, and I automatically just feel this sense of protection and safety because he made me feel so calm, and I was just so grateful to him. And if you watched the Who the Fuck Did I Marry series, I truly believe that this whole experience was the equivalent to Risa Tisa's tire blowout before she met her ex-husband. And God was telling me to run far away from this man. My bad on misinterpreting this message. And I just thought that this was God's way of telling me that this man's gonna keep me safe. And clearly that wasn't the case. But we leave the hospital and we go back to the hotel. And obviously I couldn't sleep because I had a severe concussion. So we just stayed up talking all night. And the next day I went to go get all my prescriptions, and then we went to the airport, and it was a really, really tough goodbye because I was just so sad to say goodbye to him. And he had already booked a flight to come visit me in Dallas in 10 days. He booked it before I even went to Monaco because he told me he was so sure of me and of us. And so I knew I was gonna see him in a little bit over a week, but it just wasn't enough. And I just wanted to be with him 24/7. But I said my goodbyes to him, and I was like, you know what? It's gonna be okay. I'm gonna see him soon. Hopped on the plane and went back to Dallas. And it was really difficult to come home for multiple reasons. The biggest reason was that I had to tell my parents that not only did I have this crazy accident, but I also am in love with this man that lives in Denmark. And that's just not a easy conversation to have with the Nigerian parents. And if you know Nigerian parents, or if you have Nigerian parents, you can already assume how this unfolded. Obviously, they support me and they love me and they're wonderful parents, but they were also scared and like, what are you telling me right now? But I dropped the ball, and over time, like, they were so supportive of me and my decisions. I will say the bigger challenge was healing from the head injury because I was just doing crazy ass shit. Like, I remember I got into the shower with my socks on, and then I ran out the door with my bonnet on, chasing Smokey through the streets because I thought he ran away, even though he was inside the house. And to this day, I still think I have lingering effects because I'll add all these filler words, and like what I want to say in my head, I think it, but I can't figure out the words sometimes. And it's very frustrating at times, and you will notice it throughout the series. And it's not something I used to do, but overall, I'm fine. My brain's fine. So obviously we're talking on the phone every single day because, you know, we're in a relationship, and he calls me and he says, hey, I'm considering offering on this apartment complex in Copenhagen. And we had talked about his real estate investments back in the south of France. He had told me that he owned 3 apartments in Copenhagen, 2 of which were rented out, one of which he was occupying as his personal residence. And this apartment complex he was interested in had 34 units, and then there was a top floor that was unfinished, and it could be converted to 10 penthouses. And he said it's fully rented out. It would be such a great investment. The cash flow is great. The only thing is that it's going to take up a lot of my cash liquidity, and also like stocks and crypto and everything. And obviously I'm going to be traveling to the States, and I want to be mindful of like finances. That's why I like want to bring it up to you. So what do you think? And I said, well, at this point, we had been dating for like a couple weeks, so I didn't feel like I was in a place where I could insert my opinion. So I told him, like, whatever you think, I'll support you. And I also didn't know jack shit about real estate investments in Copenhagen. And also, I had just gone to the south of France with him. That whole entire trip, I had spent 15 euros the entire trip. I tried to pay for stuff. He would not take a dime from me. So at this point, I like almost am like searching for a way to prove to him that I'm not with him for his money. So I told him, I go, if I need to, you know, take on some more of like the financial responsibilities in this relationship, I'm more than happy to do so, because this is a partnership and you're there for me when I need you, and I'm going to be there for you when you need me. And he said, you know, I appreciate you saying that, but I don't think it's going to come to that, but thank you for saying that. I said, of course. So he offers on it, and his offer wins apparently by like 1,000 euros. And he decides he's going to move forward with this property maybe a couple days before he came to visit me in Dallas. And I was fully supportive of him buying this property, 100%, because he's a successful businessman. And if he thinks this is a smart move, then I trust him. And also, the money was a whole separate other thing. I didn't care. All I cared about was being with him. So he's coming to Dallas, and I'm getting excited, not just because he's coming to see me, but this is a trip where he's going to start to meet my people, and it's getting real. And so I remember he was flying into Dallas. It's the middle of September, and I made this sign. It said, "Welcome to Dallas, my Danish man." And I'm waiting outside baggage claim, waiting for him to get through customs. And I'm holding this sign super high, waiting for him to come through. And I will continue the rest in part 5. Danish deception, part 5. Okay, so he comes out of the baggage claim past customs, and I see him, and immediately I'm hit with a realization that I've got it so bad. And if you've never been in love before, falling in love for the first time is like getting swallowed by a current, and you don't even know it's there, and you're good one moment, and then before you realize it, you're in deep, and there's nothing you can do to control it. And that's how I felt. And I knew this man has the power to destroy me. And that was exhilarating, but also terrifying at the same time. And I was just really excited to integrate him with my people. And most importantly, I was excited for him to meet Smokey, who is just my world. And watching the way he was with Smokey, they instantly became best friends, and Smokey grew really attached to him. And I mean, I knew I had fallen in love with him, but I realized I hadn't even scratched the surface when I saw him with Smokey. And so we did a lot of things that trip. So we went to a Cowboys game, we went to a retirement party for a partner at my accounting firm, we went to a couple dinners, and then we also just stayed at home. I cooked a lot. I remember I made him red stew and rice, which is my favorite Nigerian food. It's a staple. And I put a lot of habanero peppers, and I remember being nervous, like, can he handle spice? And he ate it and he loved it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this white boy loves spice. This is perfect. And everything just felt like, again, it felt like everything was aligning. And so I wanted to plan something special for him to meet all of my close friends and family. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe we can go meet for a drink. And he said, you know, like, we can go out to eat. I'll pay for everything. I was like, are you sure? He said, absolutely. So I planned a brunch, and we went to brunch here in Dallas, and it was a handful of my really close friends, and my 2 sisters were there, and my cousin and his now wife was there too. So we sit down at brunch, and everyone's like asking him questions, and everyone is just so impressed by him. Again, we're dealing with someone that's very charming, very charismatic. And the thing about my ex is when you meet him, he's so good at asking questions, and he's good at listening. And so it's really easy to get into good conversation with him, and it's really easy to connect with him. And so we had a great brunch. I remember I was like in the bathroom, and my friends followed me, and they're like, oh my gosh, he's amazing. Like, we're so happy for you. And I just, I was so grateful to call him mine. And so after brunch, we go grab a drink at a place nearby the restaurant. And at that point, we're all just kind of like chit-chatting, and my cousin and my ex are having a conversation. And this cousin is like a second brother to me. We're very, very close. And I desperately wanted to get the stamp of approval from him. And so obviously they're shooting their shit, and I'm eavesdropping on the conversation 100%. And because I can. And I'm like overhearing them just like, talking about random stuff. And then I hear my cousin ask him, you just have the build of an athlete. Did you play sports? And my ex goes, yeah, I actually played handball. And my cousin goes, isn't that an Olympic sport? And my ex goes, yeah, I actually went to the Olympics twice. And I immediately inserted myself into the conversation. I go, you went to the Olympics? What? And he goes, you know what? I was like the backup of the backup. I didn't even play. I don't like to brag about it because I don't think it's that big of a deal. I was like, well, did you get medals? He was like, yeah, I got a bronze and I got a gold. I was like, well, that's amazing. Like, I'm so impressed. And so now I'm thinking, this man is so humble. So let's add humble to the list of all the reasons why he's such an amazing man. So obviously we had a wonderful trip. He came to Dallas. Again, I did not spend any money while he was here. I obviously paid money for groceries when he wasn't around, but other than that, he wanted to pay for everything. He didn't even want me to pay for ice cream, small things. He was like, I want to treat you. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So I remember he was leaving to go back to Denmark, and I was so depressed. And if anyone has been in a long distance relationship, you know how difficult it is to say goodbye. And so I was so depressed, and I'm saying goodbye to him at the airport. I'm bawling my eyes out. We finally say goodbye. He goes through security. I go home, and I just am crying for hours. I'm so depressed. And I remember I was supposed to go to a birthday party that night, and I texted my friend. I was like, I literally cannot stop crying, so I can't go to this birthday, and I hate canceling things. And so that's how bad it was. I was actually depressed for literally days. And after he got through security, he was like, I can't even walk to the terminal. I'm so depressed. I just want to walk back out and just come back to you. And I was like, I want that too. And he said, we need to start having the hard conversations on what we want for the future. And I said, absolutely. And so he was like, we need to decide whether or not we're going to live in Denmark or live in Dallas. And I still can't believe this came out of my mouth, but I told him, I said, listen, I know you already have like a very much established career. And so if you want me to move to Denmark, I'm more than happy to have that conversation with you and like discuss it. And he said, you know, looking at you with your friends and your family this past week has made me realize that I don't want to take that away from you. And you're really close with your parents, they're driving distance away. And like, I live in Copenhagen, my family lives in my hometown in Aalborg, which is hours away. I don't have family in Copenhagen, and I want us to be around family, especially like if we're talking about having kids one day. Like, I want that support, and I want you to be around the people that you love. And so I was so happy, because realistically I did not want to move to Denmark. And so I was so happy that this man is willing to give up everything to be with me. So I was so excited about that. So he was gone for about 3 weeks to a month at this point, and he hadn't booked his flight back to Dallas yet. And then he booked it on like a Thursday, I remember it. So now we're in the middle of October of 2022. He books his flight and he said, okay, I'm coming next week, Wednesday. And I said, okay, perfect. And I'm getting all excited again. And so I called him Friday morning, and keep in mind that there's a time difference. So it's like about 7 hours. So whenever I wake up at like 5 or 6, he's basically halfway through his day. And so I called him that Friday and I said, hey, like, how's your day been? He's like, it's been such a stressful, intense day. I go, what happened? And he's like, I found out that the apartment complex that I bought is dealing with some major foundation issues. Like, it could affect safety of the tenants, and I'm really stressing out and I need to get it fixed. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, did you schedule the repair? He's like, not yet. It's gonna cost like a hefty chunk of change. I was like, how much is it gonna cost? He's like, $50,000. I was like, $50,000? What? Like, that's obviously a lot of money. I'm sure it's a lot of money to a lot of you. It's a lot of money to me. And so I was like, okay, like, what's the plan? He's like, I mean, I have a good portion of it, so I just need to ask my dad for a little bit of a loan. And so I remember being like, I can never in a million years ask my dad for a loan of $50,000. So at this point, I was aware of the fact that like they had this royal title, they had this family trust that like, and like the family had money. I didn't really know like how much or the details behind it. But he told me he was gonna call his dad and ask him for a loan. So a couple hours go by, he calls me and he's really upset. He's like, I talked to my dad on the phone. He will not loan me the money. He says, I've been acting super irresponsible, traveling, doing all these things. And so he just doesn't wanna, he thinks I need to like learn from my actions. And if I'm not prepared for something like this, then there's nothing he can do to help me. And so I felt really bad for him, because he essentially felt like his dad was abandoning him, and I felt really bad for him. And so I said, what's the plan? He's like, I'll figure it out. Like, even if I have to like sell some things, like I'll figure it out. And I was like, okay, well, keep me updated, like whatever you need. And so a couple days go by and he's communicating that he's still stressed out about coming up with this money. And so I said, you know what? Like, I can loan you the money. And so at this point, I had paid off my student loans, paid off my car, bought a house. Like, I had a decent savings. I was in a really, really good financial position. And so I wanted to help him, especially because like this man has like treated me so well and done so much for me. And I truly felt like we were in a partnership, especially like when you're talking about the future with someone. And so I told him, like, let me loan it to you. He goes, I would never in a million years borrow money for you. And I was like, it's okay. Like, I don't mind helping. He's like, that's like not even a discussion I want to have. And I said, okay, that's fine. So a couple of days go by and he's still stressing out about coming up with this money. I asked him, like, how much do you need? He's like, it's 10,000 I need. And I was like, again, like, let me loan it to you. He said, no, I'm not taking money from you. And then a couple of days go by and he says, okay, like, now I need 6K. And I was like, okay, again, let me give it to you. He's like, no, I still don't want to take money from you. And then basically, like, the day, like 2 days before he's supposed to come to Dallas, he tells me, he says, just letting you know, I'm not be able to come to Dallas because I need to figure out this issue. And I'm, at this point, I start freaking out because I'm like, no, like, I 100% like want you to come still. Just let me loan you the money so that you'll be fine and we can, you know, be happy and be together. And so after some thinking, he was like, okay, fine, I will borrow the money from you, but you have to promise me that this will be the only time and that you're 100% comfortable with giving me this money. And I said, absolutely, I'm 100% comfortable. And we will continue on in part 6. The Danish deception, part 6. Okay, so I've decided to loan him this money and he's agreed to it. So I download this app, it's called Revolut, and it's kind of like Venmo where you can send money internationally instantly. So I download it. It took like a day to like verify all my information, and I was able to send him the 6K, and the next day he flew into Dallas to come be with me. And so that trip was really fun. We really didn't do a whole lot. I remember we just like went to the state fair and we went to dinner like once, and the rest of the time we just hung out at home. And I remember it was hard for him because he was dealing with some really bad back pains, and I think it was just because he was flying a lot, and he said he injured his back when he was playing handball. So I remember I was giving him like back massages like almost every single day because it was really, really bad. And so this trip was very, very short. He was only there for a week, but I would say this was a very special trip for us because this was like the first time that he actually started making friends, like through me. And I started watching him start to make guy friends. And so this was when I got even more excited because I felt like we were really starting to, build a life here in Dallas together. So he leaves, obviously, again, I'm depressed again. And at this point, I know he's definitely planning on coming to Dallas for Thanksgiving to meet my parents, but I didn't know when he was planning on flying back. And so basically he's gone, and I feel like the second he leaves, like everything just kind of like starts to like fall apart for him. And so for starters, his back pain was getting like much, much worse. He was complaining about it every single day. Like he would text me in the middle of the night being like, it hurts so bad. And I felt terrible because I wanted to help him, but there was nothing I could do because I'm living 5,000 miles away. On top of that, his uncle, who was really sick with cancer, had passed away, and he told me the funeral was gonna be the next week. And I remember telling him, I will fly to Denmark if I need to, if you want me to be there for you. And he's like, no, it's fine. Like I can handle it. It's okay. And so basically that happened. And then I remember I went to Charlotte to go visit one of my girlfriends who had just had a baby. One of my girlfriends that I've been friends with for years and years since college. And so I'm in Charlotte with my friend, and I get a text from him. He's saying, hey, my dad's in the hospital. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? And he was like, we still don't understand what happened, but the doctors are running tests. And so later on that day, he told me that he had blood poisoning, and he had like, his infection numbers were like going crazy. And I remember telling him, well, if you're not able to come to Dallas in November, obviously I'll understand, especially like if your dad's in the hospital, like I understand completely. Again, I told him, I'll be there for you if you want me to. He's like, it's okay. Over the course of the next couple days, his dad started to show some more improvement. So he ended up deciding to come to visit me in Dallas. So now we're in November of 2022. So he comes back to Dallas, and basically this was a very exciting trip because number one, I used to be on the board of an organization called UIU. It's a nonprofit that celebrates Igbo Nigerian culture, and my culture is so important to me. And so I was the event coordinator for the Dallas chapter, and I was so proud of this. Like we had just won chapter of the year out of all the chapters in the nation. It was just such a huge accomplishment for me and my whole board. And I remember my cousin, who I told you guys I'm really close with, he was the president. And so we had a huge gala that we planned that year, and we had people flying in from all over the country to come. And obviously it took a lot of planning, and I was working really hard to make sure it was executed perfectly. I remember the day of the gala comes, and he is helping me set up, do everything that entire day. And this was the first time that I fully like integrated him with a bunch of Nigerians. And I was really curious to see how he was gonna react to being with all these people, because obviously Nigerians are so much fun, but some people might think we're a little bit too much. Forget them, but I wanted to make sure that he wasn't one of those people. So we have the gala, he helps me set up all day, and I'm just kind of watching him at the gala, just talking to people, and he's getting along with everyone. He's dancing to the Afro beats, and I just feel like, okay, he really takes my culture seriously. Like he wants to make sure that I know that he's gonna make sure this is a part of his life too. And I remember just being really happy about that. And so after the gala was done, it was a couple days, and my parents came to visit me in Dallas for Thanksgiving. And so I remember he went to go stay at a hotel because my parents, obviously, they're Nigerian, very traditional. We wanted to be respectful. So he went and stayed at a hotel, and my parents came to visit. and he was here when my parents got in town. And I'm telling you, my parents fell in love with him immediately. And I think watching him with my dad it just warmed my heart, because they just instantly connected. And my dad, like everyone else, was very fascinated by him. And I remember the following day we went to African market with my parents. It was just me, my ex, and my parents. And he's talking to my parents about the Olympics, and they're asking him all these questions. And he was like, yeah, like the gold medal I gave to my mom, she has it. And then the bronze medal, I actually donated it to charity. And I'm just like, this guy is just so freaking amazing. And so we had an amazing Thanksgiving. It was his first Thanksgiving in the States. And my grandmother had recently just passed away. And this is my dad's mom. It was really, really sad. And he was talking to us about the plans for the burial. And so he said, we're gonna do the burial in May. It's gonna be in the village in Nigeria. And he looks at my dad and he says, I'll be there. And I remember looking at him like, I don't think you really understand what you're agreeing to. And he said, I don't care. I'm gonna be there. I'm like, we're talking about the village in Nigeria. We're not just talking about like a big city where you can get a little bit of culture shock, but you like, you know, or go back to your hotel. And no, we're talking about being in the village. And he said, I don't care, I'm gonna be there. And so that was when I realized, like, this man really takes my culture seriously. He wants to be there for me. He wants to be there for my family. And that meant so much to me. And so at the end of the trip, I told him, I said, this week has showed me that I know that I want to spend my life with you. And thank you for being the man that you are. And he said, I want to spend my life with you. And I'm going to let you know, like, I already know that I want to marry you someday. Like, and I don't want you to ever doubt that. And so he asked me, he's like, I have a question. Like, do you have an idea of what ring you would want? And I was like, I mean, I have some ideas, but I have not thought about it really extensively. And so he said, what are your thoughts on us going ring shopping? And keep in mind, at this point, we've been dating for like 4 months. And so I was like, okay, let's do it. So we found a jeweler. We went and we tried on some rings. I remember I'm trying on lab grown and natural, and I'm like looking at the price differences, and I'm like, I am not allowing you to buy me a natural stone, because that number is just crazy. I'd rather us spend money investing, doing other things. And he said, well, let me look into it, because I kind of do want to get you natural. And I was like, no, we're getting a lab grown. And I remember, like, if you've, you know, gone ring shopping, you know, the price difference is like astronomical. And so I remember I picked out a ring that I really liked, and then we left, and that was basically the end of like the rings for that moment. And so he goes back to Denmark, and the plan was for me to go on a trip with him for Christmas. As I mentioned previously, my parents were traveling for Christmas, and him and his older sister do not have a relationship. Like, they can't be in intimate settings together, so they alternate Christmases. Like, he had last Christmas, so this Christmas was her Christmas. So we already had planned to spend Christmas together. And so originally we were talking about going to South Africa, like I mentioned before, and then we started looking at flights, and he was like, it's a long trip, I only want to fly business, and they were like $12,000 round trip. And he's like, well, maybe we can make it work. I was like, we are not spending that much on flights to South Africa. That's not happening. And so I started looking at other flights, and then we talked about maybe going to Brazil. And then he tells me, okay, make an itinerary and look at hotels and flights and everything and send it to me, and I'll book it. We're gonna go to Brazil. I said, okay, sounds good. So I wake up one day, I said, hey, did you book the travel? And he was like, no, I haven't, but there's something I need to talk to you about. I go, what's up? He goes, so I talked to a doctor because my back has gotten really, really bad, and it turns out I have 2 herniated discs, and I'm gonna need to get surgery. And I said, okay, like, that's fine. And he said, I'm gonna have to get surgery December 21st. And I said, oh wow, okay, well, that's fine. We don't need to go on a trip. I'll just come to Denmark and I'll help you recover and everything. And he said, actually, no, I don't want you to come to Denmark. I want you to be there, but I don't want that to be the first time you meet my parents, and they definitely want to be there. And at this point, I'm like, what do you mean? I'm your girlfriend and we're talking about a future. Why would I not be there when you're getting a major surgery? And I will continue on in part 7. Okay, Danish deception, part 7. So he tells me that he needs to get a back surgery, and he does not want me to come to Denmark because he wants me to meet his parents with him there, because there's a serious language barrier, and he wants to make sure that I can communicate with them through him. And he's like, I don't want you to be using Google Translate to talk to them the first time you meet them. And yeah, and at first I was really upset because I felt like he wasn't treating me like I was his family. And I remember having a conversation to my mom about it because I was really frustrated. And she asked me, she said, do you think his parents know about you? And I remember I got really defensive because I told her, in what world would his parents not know about me? And I told him, I really want to be there. I was still kind of like pushing on him for like the full day. And I remember